We need to talk about Texas, folks. It seems that the Lone Star State may very well be about to flip to the Democratic Party. And I want to talk about this and one other small, slight change I want to bring up. Namely, the fact that we keep hearing the same mantra from Republicans of, oh, well, Democrats are leading now, but when it comes to Election Day, oh boy, Republicans are going to turn out and swamp them. Because right now it appears that in basically every state, the Democrats are leading in early and mail-in voter turnout. There are a few cases where things have narrowed slightly, such as Florida, where it does appear to be that the Democrats while they are in the lead in mail-in votes, they are not in the lead in early votes. However, vastly more mail-in votes have been cast than early votes. And we're now waiting on the fact to see where other states go. Some states do not report individual voter numbers, such as Texas, but we can guesstimate from one national data, local data, and a little bit of hearsay and leaks, but we're mostly going to guesstimate from national data and expected turnout via the polls. So, just initially looking at Texas's data, you can see this is from the official Texas election website. So, what they give, and this is a little bit of an incorrect method to go on, and I'll explain why in just a moment. They give the number of registered voters, how many people have voted in person. This is the most recent data I have access to from the 22nd, the Thursday. How many people that have voted in person, the percentage that have voted in person, how many have voted by mail, the total amount, and then the total amount of people who have voted before the election. Now, overall, you're seeing they're claiming, so while the election data right now is saying compared to 2016, they're at 71.1%. Here it's saying, well, compared to registered voters, it's only at 37.63%, which is almost half the amount that's being claimed compared to 2016. So where's the big mess up? Well, if we look at their 2016 data, we can see that Texas only had a turnout of about, let me see, it was at the top there, sorry, 9 million votes, just under half of their total voter numbers. There are a lot of counties in Texas. Genuinely just over half. And this is pretty par for the course, because if we go back to 2012, we can see that the total number of votes cast was just over about 8 million. 2008, just over 8 million. So Texas overall, while there's been some gain in votes, has overall actually had a pretty stagnant number of votes in the presidential election for, at least the past decade. So going by total voter turnout may not be correct. However, knowing the number of registered voters is important because that shows you the maximum turnout that could happen. So nearly double 2016. But here's why it's really bad for Republicans right now in Texas, and why I'm going to make what might be a little bit of a controversial call in a moment. Out of the top counties, which I've just managed to glitch the total of, out of the top counties, which is Harris, Dulles, Tarrant, Bexar, Travis, through El Paso, I won't read them all out, the Democrats have not turned in their 2016 totals. They're about halfway there overall. This is incredibly bad for the Republicans because I'm already hearing news that Tarrant, Collin, and Denton counties are all leaning heavily blue in early voting based on some turnout reports. If Democrats flip these counties, they're already looking likely to flip Texas. And with the high turnout rates, so remember, in 2016, Harris County was at about 1.3 million, and then below this we were all in the hundreds, late hundreds, so 750, 660, 580, that type of thing. And they are already more than halfway to breaking these records. There is a solid chance that by Election Day, they will have passed these records, and those will be in favor of the Democrats. You see, Democrats not only need to win better overall over the Texas average, they need to do very well in these Texas counties. And they seem like they're on track too. Keep in mind, As of the 22nd, Texas had only been doing early voting for a day and a week, for 8 days, a week and a day. And they're already at 71% turnout, with very little sign of slowing. To give you an idea how quick this turnout has accumulated, for the first 3 days they had a turnout rate of 10%. Now they're at about 5% a day. First 4 days, I think, they had 10%. But now they're about 5% a day, with the number not looking like it's slowing down. And if they, in order for Texas to be below 100% 2016 voter turnout, they will need the daily number to drop below 3% on average, which seems incredibly unlikely, especially with the amount of voters that still have to come in and are coming in from these very populated counties. Once again, Harris through El Paso are the really big ones for the Democrats. And in Texas, high voter turnout has historically been bad news for the Republicans. Now, the Democrats haven't won, but the greater the Democratic turnout and enthusiasm, the tighter the race seems to be in Texas, and the state in general has been going more blue. So looking back here, we see Texas at 71%. If Texas goes over that, it could very well be over for Republicans. Now keep in mind, Democrats do need to make up, if we assume perfect 2016 turnout for Republicans, and it'll probably be a little bit higher. Democrats need to gain just over 1 million votes. Can they do that? Numbers here say yes. They could make that up just out of their biggest counties. And you need to keep in mind, early voting turnout in Texas, last we knew, was about 22%. New or sporadic, they're called, voters, which means voters who didn't vote in 2016 or 2018 and seem excited to vote for Joe Biden, indicating Republicans are, in fact, behind in Texas early voting. So if Texas hits 100% of 2016 turnout, and we're still getting numbers that indicate Democrats are ahead, that means Democrats have already beaten their 2016 turnout, while Republicans are behind. That leads me into my other point. I have been hearing this a lot from so many people that they've been saying, hey, 2016, you know what happened? Democrats, they led in the early voting, and then Republicans, big spike on election day, made it so competitive. That's always what happens. And that's what's going to happen this year. But I'm going to say this, and I really want people to be aware of it, because it's something you really need to keep in mind with whenever someone claims, oh, we're going to have a big event later. It hasn't happened yet. Every vote cast now has been cast. You can't go back and change your ballot. Every vote here, like I said, I believe Democrats are in the lead in Texas. That means, even if it's, we're saying 51% of the votes going to the Democratic Party, that means Democrats have already accumulated just over 36% of the vote. Just over 37% of the vote, actually. That's really bad for Republicans, who should be in the lead in Texas. And even if they have a massive voting spike on election day, you want to have a voting spike not when you're behind, and also us not assuming that the other party just won't show up on election day. I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's not like the Democrats get 3 weeks when they get to vote, but they're not allowed to vote on election day. That's for Republicans. So while we can expect higher Republican turnout on election day, we shouldn't be expecting Democratic turnout to crater and them only to get a small trickle of votes in. We're probably going to see the Democrats gain at least, maybe less in Texas, but overall, at least 10% of their votes in most states on election day. I'm willing to bet closer to 30% of their total vote on election day, while Republicans are likely to gain about 60%. That's also historically accurate in some very mail-in states, but that's still a 2-to-1 margin for Republicans. That's a lot you need to beat. And the more they keep talking about, well, we're going to have massive turnout on election day, every day they say that is another day when they are losing ground to the Democrats. And also, that means they need to focus on turning out their high propensity voters, their usual voters. Well, Democrats can focus on turning out their low propensity voters, people who don't normally come out. Those sporadic voters I mentioned are pretty key in this area. And I'm just going to say this one last thing. With the trends nationally, there's a lot of people, including myself, who are like, we need to wait and see, give it about a week before we can make a call on are states which have historically, that are a bit contentious, like Wisconsin and Iowa and Texas and Montana, Florida, Georgia, the usuals, do these indicate that there will be higher than average turnout in these states? And before, I was a little bit more wary on it. But now we've waited, we've seen the trend, and it looks like there's going to be higher turnout, especially in the South. We don't know how much higher turnout, but definitely higher turnout. Well, Republicans are relying on something which I don't feel confident in saying. There's going to be a massive amount of Republican turnout on Election Day. Will there be a large amount of Republican turnout on Election Day? Yes. Will it be 2016? Maybe? I mean, Republicans, to give you an idea of the difference between motivation, in 2016, for example, in Texas, Republicans turned out and did about 4.6 million votes. In 2018, during an equally contentious, and the Democrats did 3.8 million. In 2016, Republicans did 3.8 million. 2018, Republicans did 3.8 million. Democrats did 3.8 million. Close to being tied. So in a high turnout midterm election, Democrats beat Republicans. Now we need to see what happens in a high turnout presidential election. The closest we have is 2008, and Democrats swept there. And while Republicans may very well turn out on Election Day, like I said, they're going to have to turn out in force. We're talking massive amounts of voters in a lot of these states, which I'm not sure if they can do. So I'm going to make a bit of a controversial call. I know I just released my presidential election prediction, but I'm going to say Texas is now tilt blue. We have to wait and see. We need to see what happens over the next 2 weeks. Things can change. But I'm making that addendum now. Texas is now a tilt blue state at the presidential level, tilt red at the Senate level, and if Texas breaks 100% before Election Day, and there are signs indicating Democrats are still ahead, Texas is tilt blue for the Senate election as well. So, with all that being said, if you like the video, drop a like down below, and also leave a comment. I'm curious to hear your opinions of what a blue Texas could mean. If you want to see more from this channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be alerted when new content comes out. If you want to hear more from me outside of YouTube, I do have a Twitter, @OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link in the description. Otherwise, as always, have a wonderful day.